forced blacks to make decisions circumscribed by their exclusion from a variety of social and economic institutions. So increasing separation opened new opportunities for business, professional, religious, and political leadership. And by the first decade of the 20th century, a new middle class had begun to replace an older elite that had been wary of separate black institutions. So this new generation included black editors, politicians, business people, ministers, and these are all people who would dominate Chicago's black institutions during the Great Migration. So what's changing is by the 1920s, blacks of all political persuasions are sharing a commitment to a separate black economy. In the face of racial segregation and discrimination, the black community would forge an alternative metropolis, this city within a city, that rejected white economic control without rejecting capitalism. So at the center of the separate black economy stood race businesses. Black consumers were told that when they patronized these businesses, they bought black jobs, black entrepreneurship, and black independence, along with goods and services, and bid farewell to white employment prejudice, insults, and overcharging. So here are some examples of some of these race businesses, as they were called. Grocery stores, black-owned funeral homes, and barbershops. So black consumer dollars supported all kinds of black businesses in the 1920s, but those businesses whose products and services were geared solely to black needs benefited the most. Undertakers, barbers, and beauticians faced few white contenders for the right to perfect the appearance of blacks living or dead. In the same way, black cosmetic companies, among them the Overton Hygienic Manufacturing Company, made millions marketing brands for blacks, including skin whiteners. And I'm sure many of you know about Madam C.J. Walker, who was America's first black female millionaire. She established a headquarters in Chicago, and she was the daughter of former slaves, but she transformed herself from an uneducated farm laborer and laundress into one of the 20th century's most successful self-made women entrepreneurs. So black consumers made black-owned insurance companies, however, the greatest business triumph of them all. Although black companies faced aggressive competition from mainline insurance companies, they nonetheless captured a healthy share of the market by exposing that white firms charged blacks higher premiums and refused to hire black agents. The black insurance market was a profitable one. Blacks of every social status valued insurance for its promise of security in life and dignity at death. In 1918, the Illinois Health Insurance Commission found that 93.8% of black workers carried life insurance, a rate that surpassed all white ethnic groups in Chicago. Now, despite the good intentions of many of its residents, Chicago's black metropolis could never boast a totally separate black economy. In some cases, no black alternative to a white business existed. In other cases, chain stores were able to compete with smaller race businesses and offer lower prices. And of course, most crushing was the lack of capital that black entrepreneurs and black businesses had at their disposal. There were only 2 black banks in the city that could be counted on for loans, and their resources were limited. So under these circumstances, black merchants could hardly afford to offer customers the credit that other businesses could. Still, by 1929, Chicago ranked first among cities in the number of black-owned stores, with a total of 815 in the city. Now, if blacks could not own successful businesses, they argued that at least they should be able to work in them. So blacks put pressure on chain stores to hire black clerks. By mid to late 1920s, consumer boycotts forced chain stores to hire blacks, and these really flourished on Chicago's South Side. This spirited movement to achieve black economic independence through employment rather than entrepreneurship was waged on many fronts, and the Chicago Defender was very much involved in announcing these boycotts and advertising what stores did not hire black workers. So these don't spend your money where you can't work crusades pressured black belt branches of several stores, including Sears and Roebuck, A&P, and Woolworths and Walgreens to employ blacks. Okay, so we are just about out of time. So I'm going to just skip a little bit. I know we're going to talk about the Chicago Defender a little bit later. And I'm going to just end by talking a little bit about how successful the Great Migration was, and did it really live up to its expectations, to kind of return to a question that we began with. Did the Great Migration achieve the aim of those who participated in it? Were the people who left the South better off for having done so? And was the loss of what they left behind worth what confronted them in the cities that they fled to? Throughout the migration, social scientists all but concluded that the answer to those questions was no, that the migration had led to troubles of the urban North and West. Most scholars blame the dysfunction of the inner cities on the migrants themselves. These migrants were cast as poor illiterates who brought out of wedlock births, joblessness, and welfare dependency wherever they went. But newly available census records suggest the opposite to be true. Migrants, it turns out, were better educated than those left behind in the South, and on the whole had nearly as many years of schooling as those they encountered in the North. Compared to the Northern blacks already there, migrants were more likely to be married and remain married, more likely to raise their children in two-parent households, and more likely to be employed. The migrants as a group managed to earn higher incomes than Northern-born blacks, even though they were relegated to the lowest-paying positions. In the early decades of the migration, it would have been difficult to imagine that the migrants would end up leading the very cities that had rejected them upon their arrival. For example, the first black mayors in each of the major receiving cities of the North and West were the sons of parents who had migrated from the South. Many black parents who left the South got the one thing they wanted just by leaving. Their children would have a chance to grow up free of Jim Crow and to be their fuller selves. It cannot be known what the course of the lives of people like Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, Aretha Franklin, Michelle Obama, Bill Cosby, Condoleezza Rice, Oprah Winfrey, Queen Latifah, Sean Puffy Combs, and countless others might have been if their parents or grandparents had not participated in the Great Migration and raised them in the North. And of course, millions of other children of the migration grew up to lead productive, though anonymous lives in quiet, everyday ways that few people ever hear about. In the end, it could be said that the common denominator for leaving was the desire to be free. Free to try out any job they pleased, to play checkers with whomever they chose, to sit where they wished on a streetcar, to watch their children walk across a stage for the degree most of them didn't have the chance to get. In the simple process of walking away one by one scholar wrote, millions of black Southerners have altered the course of their own lives and all of America's history. And I just want to end, and I'm skipping over some of the slides that I want to show you, but I want to end with an image of my father, my Aunt Shirley, and a childhood friend of theirs. So this is my dad when he was about 4 years old. Sitting on the steps at the age of 4, my father, a migrant himself, who had just arrived in Chicago from Augusta, Georgia, probably couldn't have imagined that years later he would be able to go to the University of Illinois without great discrimination or fear. He would enter the military and become a captain. He would become a professional engineer with NASA, and later he would spend most of his career working for IBM, the top technology company of the time. His parents' decision to move to Chicago enabled him to live a very comfortable life. If he had stayed in the South, he would have gone to segregated schools. In the 1950s, he would not have been able to enter the University of Georgia without some trauma. He would have survived, but he may not have flourished in the ways that he did. And as a grandchild of the migration, I might not have the wonderful opportunity that I have today to talk to such devoted and engaged teachers like each of you. So if you ask my father about the migration, he will tell you that it was a resounding success. If you ask him whether the migration achieved the goals of the migrants, the answer is yes. Thank you so much.